question. How to stay neutral in a situation where you are being bombarded by opinion or strong point of view in an accusatory way and not go defensive? How does unconditional love play its role in that situation? How to find growth from that experience in consideration of free will and unconditional love? How to let the ghost die and not solidify it? How to find peace from the Christ, the one mind, without dualistic sense of winning? So these are very good questions. Let's step back and just look at the human experience, including our own, including many people we can observe around us. You just go on Facebook, you see people's comments and how sometimes they get into arguments in their comments. Two people can keep going back and forth like it's a matter of life and death, that they convince this perfect stranger that they're right. I don't know if you have seen this posting on Facebook, but it says this: I have a device in my pocket, your mobile phone, that gives me access to all of the knowledge ever discovered by humankind. And I use it to watch cat videos and argue with strangers. And that's the irony of the internet, that it allows us to argue with perfect strangers as if it really mattered. And see, that's the key. You have to find out, why does this matter to you? How to stay neutral in a situation where you are being accused. How to not go into the defensive. Well, you have to find out why it matters to you that you are being accused, whether it's somebody you know or a perfect stranger. Why does it matter? And this is what I've explained in several of my breakthrough videos and many other videos where I talk about this. We have in our subconscious minds, we have these structures that I call selves, subconscious selves, separate selves. And these cells were created often in past lifetimes in reaction to specific situations. And one of the situations we have all been exposed to on earth is that we were accused of something. We were accused either that our viewpoints were wrong, that our actions were wrong, or that we are wrong, or that we are wrong for being here. I explain this in more detail in my avatar videos. So we have all in past lives been exposed to this accusation. There's actually, even in the book of Revelation, there is the concept that there was a war in heaven, which wasn't literally in heaven, there was a previous sphere, but it says that the accuser of our brethren has been cast down, who accused us before our God day and night. And this is a reference to the fallen beings who are always accusing those who are avatars, those who are anybody who tries to raise their consciousness. They are always being accused by the fallen beings. So in past times we have been exposed to this accusation. It's a specific energy. You can learn to recognize it. There are sometimes people are just questioning you, and other times they are accusing you because they want to put you down. And it's a specific energy. So, and I think probably most spiritual people have been exposed to it throughout our lifetimes. So you have to discover the self. You have to ask yourself, why is this important to me? Why do I feel I have to react to this? Why do I feel that just because somebody accuses me, I have to defend myself? What would it take that I'm accused and I don't react at all? I don't defend myself. I don't try to prove them wrong. I don't feel bad about myself. I just have no reaction. And the simple answer to this is that you, who you really are, as I explained in many of my videos, you are the conscious you. You are neutral awareness. And when you are in neutral awareness, no accusation will touch you. It's like Jesus said, the prince of this world cometh and has nothing in me. When you are neutral, why does it matter? And so you have to discover the self that they were created in a past life. And it's very understandable we created these selves. We all have these selves. I've had it myself. And I had to struggle with it for years to overcome these selves of being accused. But it's very important we discover them and become free of them. And what we need to do is simply say, what is the belief I have that makes me feel I have to defend myself? And it can very well be, I mean, I'm just using this as an example. It doesn't apply to everybody. But what I discovered in myself was that as an avatar, I came to Earth because I wanted to help improve conditions on Earth. And when I was accused by the fallen beings that I had done something wrong, that I had made things worse, and I shouldn't be here, I should never have come here, I felt threatened. I mean, it was like my entire reason for coming to Earth was being brought into question. And I felt I had to defend myself. I had to defend my reason for coming here, validate why I came, why it was okay to come here. And I think many avatars will find the same. This is what I talk about in my playlist about the avatar psychology. So you can watch that playlist and it might very well help you deal with these kind of situations. So I had to discover why that was so important to me. And I had to really question, well, am I actually here to change other people or change the Earth? Or am I actually here to grow personally, to learn certain lessons about free will, about sometimes you don't try to change other people. You just let them outplay their psychology to the extreme, to where they can't stand it anymore. Because no matter what you say to them, they won't change anyway. So I had to work with this, and it took me several years to really overcome this tendency to feel that I had to defend my right to be on Earth. Because I came to a point where I realized that, boy, if I don't have any desire to change other people, why do I need to defend my right to be here? I realized the dynamic was that I wanted to help people overcome suffering, even if they were not willing to make the decisions that could help them overcome suffering. I wanted to push them a little bit. I didn't want to manipulate them, I didn't want to force them, but I wanted to push them a little bit so they would overcome suffering for their own good, you know. And I had to realize that when I let that go, I was no longer violating the law of free will. And you could say, I didn't have a right to do that. I didn't have a right to try and push other people to agree with me or adopt a spiritual lifestyle or overcome suffering. So I was, in a sense, I didn't have a right to be here. That way, I didn't have a right to do that, according to the law of free will. But when I let go of that, I realized I do have a right to be here because I have a right to experience Earth and I have the right to express myself on Earth. And you can express yourself without seeking to change other people, without having an intent to change other people. You're just sharing who you are, what experiences you've gone through, what insights you've come to. So I actually have a breakthrough video where I talk about depersonalizing your life, because essentially what you're doing with this process is you're depersonalizing your life in the sense that you're not reacting to situations. It's not a matter of just defending yourself. It'll give you all kinds of other situations where you react because you feel there's something that shouldn't be happening or something that should be happening that isn't happening, and you need to react to a situation. So how does unconditional love play into that? Well, it's very helpful to consider, and it's difficult to do in the beginning, because when I first started working on my psychology, unconditional love was just a town in Russia, as they say. It was very remote from me, and I couldn't grasp it whatsoever. But there came a point where I was ready to start asking myself the question, what do I love more than my reaction, than defending myself? Is there something I love more? And what I logged into at a certain point was that I loved the Ascended Masters. I loved growth. And when I contemplated this, I realized that unconditional love is beyond all of these conditions we can define. And the conditions are defined in these separate selves. Because a separate self always defines a condition. Like, you are here to do something good, therefore you shouldn't be accused. That's a condition defined by a self. But unconditional love is beyond all of these conditions. So when you, it's almost like you could say, if you step back from all of these selves, you may say there's a certain self that's defensive, for example, that's defending yourself. But beyond that, you actually have a desire to be loved. You want to be loved here on earth. And therefore, you are seeking to create conditions or find conditions where you are loved. But as I've explained before, whatever love you might receive from earth, from other people, is never going to satisfy you. Because ultimately, the only thing that's going to satisfy you is the love you receive from your higher self and the ascended masters. And that's the unconditional love. So in other words, we have a desire to experience unconditional love, but we are seeking to fulfill it by getting conditional love through these subconscious selves. And it will never work for us. It won't even work for the subconscious self because they'll never have enough of it. But the conscious you can be tied into this merry-go-round of always seeking to get this love and validation or whatever. So when I started contemplating this about unconditional love, I realized that I can't get unconditional love horizontally from anything on earth, anyone. I can only get it vertically from my own presence and the ascended masters. And then I started experiencing it. When I realized that, when I opened myself to it, I started experiencing it. And all of a sudden, when I experienced unconditional love, it's clear that there is nothing in my psychology that is more important to me than experiencing unconditional love. Therefore, if something in my psychology blocks my experience of unconditional love, I'm willing to give it up. So, how to find growth from the experience in considering free will and unconditional love? Well, in any experience where you find yourself reacting, you can, if you're willing, if you've gotten to that point on the path, you can say, okay, if I'm reacting, there's clearly a subconscious self that's reacting. It's not really me, the conscious you, that's reacting, it's a subconscious self. I'm willing to look for that self. And you can ask the Ascended Masters, as I've done many times over the years, Mother Mary, Jesus, whoever master you're close to, help me see the self. And, so this means that any experience can be turned into a growth experience. And when you do this, you are putting the fallen beings in an impossible situation. Because they always want to take you down, put you down. And that's why they're exposing you to, for example, these accusations. Often through other people who are not aware of fallen beings and not aware of what they're doing. But they're exposing you to this. But when you decide that any experience where you react, you're going to look for the subconscious self and ever turn it into a growth experience, what can they now do? They only know one way to influence you, or their primary way is to push and push and push. But the more every time they push you, you turn it into a growth experience. So now they have this choice of, well, if he grows every time we push him, what do we do then? Do we push harder or do we stop pushing? And that's a good place to be. So that's how you turn things into a growth experience. You really take the fallen beings and, in a way, turn what they're doing back on itself. Where they're trying to put you in an impossible situation where you don't know what to do, but instead you put them in an impossible situation where they really have no way out of it. How to let the ghost die and not solidify it. Well, the ghost is the self, the separate self, the subconscious self. And how to not solidify it? Well, you can't react. You can't continue the reaction. Okay, so I think back at my life, and I had many, many situations where, let's say, I was accused by somebody. in a situation. And no matter what I did or didn't do in that situation, after the situation had passed, I would go over it in my mind again and again and again. What the other person said, whether it was right or wrong, what I did, what I said, what I thought, what I felt. Analyze, look at how could I have done differently, this and that and the next thing. And here's a subtle point here. I'm saying, whenever you find yourself reacting, look for the self, right? But that's not what I was doing for many years. I wasn't looking for the self. I was just taking the situation and replaying it over and over and over again like a broken record. And that meant I was putting my attention on it, I was feeding my energy into it. And that is solidifying the ghost. In other words, I'm feeding energy into the self. So there comes a point where you have to see that you're doing this. You have to see that you are giving your energy to the self, and you have to make a conscious decision. No, I'm not going to do this. And this was quite difficult for me because I had many situations where I tried to decide with the outer mind, okay, I'm not going to think about this anymore. But then, of course, it came back. And so I had to go over it again and again and again. But I still made some progress doing this. But it really didn't, I really didn't get beyond it until I got these teachings from the Ascended Masters about the subconscious selves. So that meant I could now look for the ghost, look for the self, and I could realize there's a certain belief there that the self is based on. And even though with my conscious mind I can refuse to continue the merry-go-round, I can stop running on the hamster wheel of the separate self, it's not until I see the belief that I'm free, that I'm off the hamster wheel completely. And so the Masters have given a lot of tools for this. I have a book called Healing Your Spiritual Traumas that has specific methods for uncovering these selves. But I've given it in YouTube videos as well. And so once you log into this process, you realize this is really the way. In the beginning, yes, you have to decide, I'm not going to feed this energy. You also can invoke spiritual light from your Ascended Masters to protect you from the dark forces, the collective entities that are pulling on you to react, and to transmute the energy in your subconscious mind that's giving them something to pull on. So this is also important. You have the conscious decision to not feed the merry-go-round, and you have the invoking spiritual light. But ultimately, you won't be free until you use the tools and teachings to find the self, see what the belief is, and you see that it's an illusion. It's completely unnecessary. And then then the self dies. You are letting the ghost die. You are giving up the ghost, as Jesus hanging on the cross, and he gave up the ghost. That was the last separate self he had that tied him to earth, that he gave up when he was hanging on the cross. How to find peace from the Christ and the one mind without a dualistic sense of winning? Well, it's a separate self that wants you to win. See, you may very well have separate selves that whenever you're accused, you feel like you have to win the argument by refuting the accusation. But you have to give that up. You have to come to a point where you see, why is that important to you? What does this matter compared to experiencing unconditional love, to growing on the spiritual path, getting closer to your Ascended Masters? What is it you love more than winning? And you see, the separate self, as I've explained before, the separate self is like a perception filter, like the colored glasses put over your eyes, and everything you see from the conscious you is colored by the self. And as long as you're inside that self, you can't contact the one mind, the Christ mind. You can't find peace. Because the self has this idea, you have to win, you have to refute the accusation. And until that's done in a final way, you won't be at peace. And by the way, it will never be done in a final way so that the self is satisfied. So you'll never be at peace until the conscious you steps outside the separate self. Then you can intuitively experience the one mind, the Christ mind. And when you get rid of the self, you will rise to a higher level of the path where you have a higher level of connection to the one mind, therefore a higher sense of peace. It's not that it's not that you suddenly awaken and now you're totally at peace. It's that every time you take a step up on a ladder of the 144 levels of consciousness, you have a higher degree of peace, and a higher degree of peace, and a higher degree of peace. I look back at my path and I can see that, you know, there have been some big breakthroughs on the path, but I can also see that I have gradually raised my inner sense of peace over all these years. So there's been an immediate reward every time I saw something and resolved something in my psychology. And I can see that really, the resolution of psychology, that is what gave me a greater sense of peace. When I saw a particular self, even though I didn't call it that in the beginning, but I saw a particular self and let the ghost die, I rose to a higher sense of peace, a higher sense of connection.